Hello and welcome. I'm Al Barrows, and this is UFO Disclosure, the podcast that's meant to show an average person's reaction to all the UFO, UAP news from everywhere and anywhere. Today's podcast will be about the conspiracy theory that's been around for a while that the moon is not a natural celestial body. I was inspired by KM Uncharted Mysteries, where they showed that the conspiracy theory originated back in the 1970s Cold War era by two scientists in the Soviet Union. In July of 1970, Mikhail Vassin and Alexander Sherbakov posed the question whether or not the moon was truly a natural satellite or whether, in fact, it could be an artificial construct. According to Vassin and Sherbakov, the moon was originally a celestial body, but was later hollowed out. The molten rock and debris expelled during the process, they claimed, had formed a hardened outer shell, something akin to armor, composed of a fusion of metals and minerals engineered to protect the structure from cosmic impacts. This artificial object was placed into a stable orbit around the Earth. When the theory was first introduced, Western scientists dismissed it immediately, labeling it ludicrous. Even within the Soviet Union, prominent physicists were quick to condemn the theory, calling it science fiction. But as the years passed, this theory began to resurface, and this time pieces of evidence began to emerge. Those findings aligned with what the two researchers had described decades earlier. In recent years, several scientific reports have begun to confirm the presence of certain metallic elements on the surface of the moon, elements that by all natural accounts should not be there. Among them are names that any nuclear physicist would immediately recognize: uranium-236 and neptunium-237, two radioactive substances that are known to emerge only through artificial processes inside modern nuclear reactors. These materials have no natural origin, which means that at some point in the distant past, an advanced technology must have left its signature on the moon. Uranium-236 cannot be found in nature. It is a byproduct of the uranium enrichment process, a process that only occurs within highly developed industrial facilities or advanced nuclear programs. Similarly, neptunium-237 is a radioactive isotope created when plutonium is synthesized under tightly controlled conditions. Both elements can only exist through human intervention. Beneath the barren, water-beaten surface of the moon lies a network of tunnels, hollow chambers, and unexplored structures. Even more perplexing is the gravitational data, which reveals that the moon's mass is not concentrated deep within its core as expected, but instead distributed heavily near the surface, as if forming a dense shell around an empty interior. This anomaly has led many researchers to revisit the once ridiculed theory proposed by Vassin and Sherbakov that the moon is not a solid natural object, but rather an engineered construct. No official space agency has ever publicly acknowledged these controversial findings. Most of the relevant data remains classified, sealed under layers of government secrecy, and what little is known has surfaced only through fragmented disclosures from former insiders or specialists who once worked within classified aerospace programs. Donna Hare is a former NASA employee who was one of those that provided evidence that moon landing pictures were being altered.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Donna Hare, and I worked at Philco Ford Aerospace from 1967 to 1981. During that time, I was a design illustrator, draftsman. I did the launch slides and landing slides, and also projection plotting boards, lunar maps for NASA. We were a contractor, but most of the time I worked on site, in Building 8. I had the opportunity to do extra work during downtime, which was between missions, and I walked into a photo lab, which was the NASA lab across the hallway. I had a secret clearance, which is not that high, but I was able to go into restricted areas, which this was. At the time, I was talking to one of the techs in there, and he drew my attention to a photograph, a NASA photograph. It had a dot on it, and I said, "What is that?" Well, he drew my attention to it, and I said, "Is that a dot on the emulsion?" And he said, and he's smiling, and he has his hands crossed, and he said, "Round dots on the emulsion don't leave round shadows on the ground." And this was an aerial photograph of the Earth, I'm assuming the Earth because it had pine trees on it, and the shadows of the craft or whatever it was were in the same angle as the trees. And by its very nature, UFO, and I wanted to clarify that to a gentleman that was talking to me, means unidentified. So I did not know what this was, but I realized at this point that it's very secret, that it was kept secret, because I asked him, "What are you going to do with this piece of information?" And he said, "We always airbrush these out before we sell them to the public." So they're pesky little creatures appearing on this photograph they wanted to get rid of. After that, I decided I would ask questions to other people that work there, and I found that I had to ask them away from the site and not on site. A guard told me that he was asked to burn some photographs and not to look at them.
So in the mid-1990s, as the Cold War finally wound down, the world began shifting toward a new era of space cooperation. The United States launched a mission known as Clementine, intended to survey the moon's polar regions for the presence of ice. But what few people knew at the time was that behind this stated objective, the Clementine mission carried a second, more discrete purpose: to conduct high-resolution imaging of the lunar surface to determine whether the moon was in fact being used by another presence. The first to reveal this hidden agenda was Dr. John Brandenburg, deputy manager of the Clementine mission and a scientist who had played a role in the development of multiple defense-related space programs. In a recorded interview after his retirement, Brandenburg stated plainly, quote, "A classified part of the Clementine mission was to conduct imaging reconnaissance to determine if someone was building a base on the moon," end quote. Images from the Clementine mission later revealed the presence of numerous anomalous bright spots, geometric shapes, and even shadow patterns suggesting the existence of freestanding structures, some potentially meters tall, scattered near the moon's shadowed regions. Some of these formations appear to exhibit symmetry and precise geometric proportions. Details so deliberate, research couldn't help but take notice. However, rather than being widely published, most of these images were later altered, blurred, or quietly removed from public archives, as Ms. Donna Hare just revealed. Altogether, several software engineers who had access to the raw Clementine image databases reported the presence of manually pixel-censored regions, as if someone had gone in after the fact and intentionally erased whatever wasn't meant to be seen. On July the 20th of 1969, astronaut Neil Armstrong stepped down from the Apollo 11 lunar module and spoke the words that would echo throughout history. "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." But what millions watching across the globe never knew was that immediately following that historic moment, the communication link between Apollo 11 and Houston Mission Control was abruptly cut for exactly 34 seconds. A brief silence dismissed publicly as a technical glitch. Yet, over the years, scattered whispers from former NASA employees have suggested otherwise, that it wasn't a malfunction at all, but a deliberate blackout. Armstrong reportedly said, "Houston, we're seeing massive objects. Oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. There are other spacecraft out here. They're lined up along the edge of the crater. They're watching us." What happened in the moments that followed has remained a subject of hushed conversations at closed-door conferences and of occasional revelations from those who were there. Here's a quick clip of Neil Armstrong himself with some commentary.
So we reached out to him and invited him to come to those events, and he politely declined and told us that it was made very clear to him and the other Apollo astronauts who witnessed this first event, where when we landed at the crater on the moon, the rim at the top of the crater was, quote, crowded with UFOs, craft that were up there, multiple of them, and that these were filmed. I know people personally who've seen that film. So we did go to the moon, but some of the footage, it doesn't make sense because the flag is moving. Now the reason for that, and this is where people say we didn't go to the moon, it was all hoax and filmed in a basement up in New York. The truth is we went, but during the lunar orbiter, going back before the Apollo mission, we actually were circling the Earth taking the first early digital photographs. And as you know from the testimony of Disclosure Project witness Carl Wolf, there were structures on the moon that were artificial. Some were newer and some were very ancient. And so they knew the covert programs, and these images were being downloaded to out here at Langley, not the CIA headquarters, Langley Air Force Base, to a compartmented operation run by the National Security Agency that was then sequestered away from the other NASA scientists. But the people running that project, the deep black people in those projects, knew that it was likely we were going to encounter something not of this world or a UFO when we landed. Therefore, they had filmed some footage that they could splice in if something started happening. So during the live transmission, if something started happening, there's a delay that went through this National Security Agency filter, and they could immediately, instantly put in. And that's why there's a couple frames where the American flag is moving. And so when they stepped out, of course, and we're approaching actually, before they even landed, they saw them. So they were already with this sort of pre-prepared film that looked very, very good, except for this one error. And so Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin know for a fact. Now, Neil Armstrong said, look, if I were to go forward and talk about what actually happened, I've been told, Neil Armstrong said this to us, that my wife, my children, and my grandchildren would all be killed, that they would take us out somehow, some terrible accident. And he says, I'm not going to talk about it. Now, Buzz Aldrin has just basically, he sort of had a nervous breakdown after this and was actually at an Air Force facility. I know a man that was there with him, and he confided that this is also what happened. I also know Buzz Aldrin's sister, who pulled me aside and says, yes, you're absolutely right. That is what happened, but it's not my job to out Buzz Aldrin on this. If he's ready and he's able and allowed, he will speak about it. But you have to understand, enormous pressure was put on these men never to speak about what actually happened.
It was even said that piloted flights to the moon might be banned. Investigators are especially interested in ancient structures resembling partially destroyed cities. Photos reveal an astonishingly regular geometry of square and rectangular constructions. They resemble our cities seen from the height of 5 to 8 kilometers. A mission control specialist commented on the pictures. Our guys observed ruins of the lunar cities, transparent pyramids, domes, and God knows what else, which are currently hidden deep inside the NASA safes, and felt like Robinson Crusoe when he suddenly came across prints of bare feet on the sand of the desert island. What do geologists and scientists say after studying the pictures of lunar cities and other anomalous objects? They say that such objects can't be natural formations. We should admit, they are artificial, especially the domes and pyramids. People were extremely surprised why the materials hadn't been presented to the public earlier. NASA specialists answered, it was difficult to forecast the reaction of people to information that some creatures had been or still are on the moon. In addition, there were some other reasons to it, which were beyond the control of NASA. Astronaut Mitchell answered the question about his feelings after his successful return. My neck still aches as I had to constantly turn my head around because we felt we were not alone there.
That was Dr. Richard Greer earlier giving that commentary. Okay, so Buzz Aldrin, who followed Armstrong onto the lunar surface, later admitted in a private interview that they had in fact seen massive craft parked not far from their position in the Sea of Tranquility. According to a communications technician who once worked inside NASA's broadcasting center, the television feed was switched to a secure channel the moment that transmission began. Ground controllers were immediately ordered to lock down the frequency, ensuring that whatever Armstrong saw would never reach public airwaves. A former space defense officer later confirmed, quote, "We didn't cut the feed because of a technical issue. We cut it because of what was being seen couldn't be allowed on television," end quote. But that wasn't the end of it. Footage captured by a 360-degree camera mounted on the lunar module reportedly showed the movement of symmetrical objects gliding along the edge of the crater's rim. Several reels of film and still photographs from Apollo 11's archive were subsequently classified as top secret and quietly disappeared from all national image repositories. In April of 1997, at a closed event attended by independent researchers, Neil Armstrong is believed to have spoken about that encounter with non-human entities. While the full extent of that conversation remains unknown, one question now lingers: how much of the truth has been hidden from us? According to revelations by Carl Wolf, a former intelligence officer who had worked at NATO's Supreme Headquarters and several European military analysis units, more than 40 film reels and thousands of individual photographs from the Apollo missions were either erased, altered, or mysteriously disappeared under suspicious circumstances. These reels did more than just document humanity's historic presence on the moon. They inadvertently captured images that no one in government ever wanted the public to see. Wolf, who had direct access to raw satellite imagery at Langley Air Force Base, recalled seeing enormous geometric structures scattered across the lunar surface. When he asked a colleague in NASA's imaging division what they were, he was met with a tense stare and a curt response. "You didn't see anything. Forget this ever happened," is what he was told. And Wolf wasn't the only one. Ken Johnston, a data and image archivist who had worked directly with the Apollo program at Johnson Space Center, also confirmed that he had been ordered to destroy original photographic negatives taken by astronauts on the moon. But instead of complying completely, Johnston quietly saved a small portion. Years later, he made them public, revealing photographs of strange anomalous structures near the very sites where astronauts had landed. According to an internal 2006 investigation conducted by NASA itself, more than 700 magnetic tapes from the Apollo missions were officially declared missing. The loss was described as unfortunate, yet officials denied that it had been intentional. But For an agency of NASA's size, with thousands of personnel dedicated to safeguarding archival materials, the idea that hundreds of reels documenting one of humanity's greatest achievement could simply vanish is something that I and the general public, I'm sure, finds difficult to accept. One former CIA pilot made a statement that shook the foundation of UFO research and challenged everything we know about the moon. There are currently about 250 million extraterrestrial beings residing within the moon. That single sentence didn't just send waves through the UFO research community, it forced even the most skeptical minds to reconsider whether the moon was ever just a barren celestial body. John Lear, a former CIA pilot who flew for major airlines and worked on classified government programs and was the son of the founder of the famed Learjet Corporation, described in his testimony an immense network of underground cities beneath the lunar surface. He spoke of non-human structures, biological laboratories, species never known to mankind. According to him, some of these species, particularly the reptilian entities and small humanoid figures, were the very same beings long rumored to be behind abduction cases, human experimentation, and unexplained phenomena that had baffled the American press for decades. Lear went further, claiming that these interior lunar structures cannot be detected by the naked eye or through conventional imaging because they are cloaked by advanced holographic projection or even energy-based force fields that do not reflect light. Technologies, he said, that far surpass anything known to human science. According to him, this is precisely why probes, telescopes, and modern satellite imagery appear to detect nothing unusual. This is Bill Tompkins, who worked for Northrop and Douglas Aerospace companies, who reportedly claims to have been in the control room when Neil Armstrong saw reptilians on the surface of the moon.
Okay, they were parked around the side of the crater. Okay, they were not parked on it, they were floating above it. So there were hundreds of these 9-foot reptilian guys standing with their legs.
Hundreds.
Yeah, they were all the way across the underneath their vehicles,
Okay, so
standing
they're
on the
9
crater.
feet, and what do they look like?
They're ugly looking, lizard, alligator type people. They
Wow.
got the same skin as the lizards got, okay? And terrible looking faces. But then they have the ability to shift and look like a human. All of them do, okay?
Okay, do you think von Braun was a reptilian?
No,
You really don't?
no.
Okay.
Your president, yes.
Oh, what? Which one? George Bush Sr.? Yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
And Bill Clinton and this guy you got
Obama?
got rid of. Yeah.
Yeah.
They all were,
Right.
okay? So, and they all have this ability to make themselves look like real good-looking people.
And you're saying Trump isn't one?
No, he's not,
Well,
okay?
that's a relief.
And and he knows more about this subject than people realize.
Oh, excellent.
But trying to get back to your earlier question, these groups of extraterrestrial who work together but are at war with other extraterrestrials, okay, have these vehicles that look like a planet,
Right.
like our moon is a vehicle. It's a command center.
Many unofficial reports about the moon being an extraterrestrial space station have propped up over the past half century, and a pattern has begun to emerge, suggesting a deep and long-standing connection between the UFO phenomenon observed on Earth and the possible presence of something else on the moon. Could it be that the moon is not just a place of extraterrestrial habitation, but rather a command center, quietly orchestrating non-human activity in and around our planet? So, what exactly is on the moon? I'm going to show a clip that I found on the internet. And mind you, everything can be altered with CGI these days, but it's pretty convincing footage of what looks like a satellite of some sort observing a building on the surface of the moon. And I got this from X, and it was posted by UFO Mania at Mania UFO, and it claims to be showing a never before seen footage of buildings on the moon. Okay, so here it is. So that's either a satellite or some sort of a lunar lander, and that's the building just to the left, upper left of the screen. Some sort of a lunar module or a satellite observing that building on the surface of the moon, I guess. Certainly looks like old footage, but that can be faked also. I guess you guys be the judge. I thought it was interesting. Okay, and I have one last clip of what appears to be a UFO entering a crater on the moon. Okay, so this was posted by World News X on Twitter, and the image reads in French, "That's where they live, on the moon. Everyone knows that, except NASA." Okay, so I don't know whether that footage is authentic or not, but I do believe that there's probably more going on the moon than we're being led to understand. I hope you guys enjoyed this. My name is Al Barrows. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks.